Some people appear cold, distant, or difficult to love, but beneath the surface they are not indifferent, they're armored. Pain reshapes how a person moves through the world, often in ways that go unnoticed. Carl Jung once said, "What is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate." When pain isn't given space to breathe, it doesn't vanish. It retreats into the shadows, morphing into patterns of behavior that masquerade as personality. These aren't flaws or quirks. They're survival strategies, meticulously crafted by a psyche that learned to guard itself against wounds too raw to touch. Consider the person who hesitates to trust, who keeps love at arm's length. Society might label them guarded or aloof, but their caution isn't indifference. It's wisdom written in scars. They felt the sting of betrayal, the hollowness of broken promises. To them, vulnerability isn't a virtue, it's a risk. Jung understood this intimately. He wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Every defense mechanism, every emotional withdrawal, is the unconscious mind's attempt to rewrite fate, to avoid reliving the past. The psyche speaks in symbols, in reactions that seem disproportionate, in silences that feel heavy. A sharp comment, a sudden withdrawal, an inability to accept kindness. These aren't random. They're echoes. Echoes of moments when love felt dangerous, when connection meant loss, when hope led to heartache. Jung called these echoes complexes, clusters of emotion and memory that act as invisible puppeteers. When a complex takes hold, it doesn't ask permission. It hijacks logic, flooding the present with the pain of the past. Someone who was abandoned as a child might unravel over a cancelled plan. Someone who endured criticism might freeze at the slightest feedback. These reactions aren't choices. They're the psyche's ancient language, pleading, "This hurt once. Don't let it hurt again." But here's the paradox. The armor that protects also isolates. A heart that refuses to trust can't be reached. A mind that lives in hypervigilance can't rest. Jung believed the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. To confront these defenses isn't just about understanding, it's about courage. Courage to ask, what is this pain protecting? What part of me still believes I'm in danger? The answers are rarely simple. They live in the quiet spaces between memory and feeling. In the stories we've told ourselves so often, they've become truth. Take the person who thrives on self-reliance, who wears independence like a medal. Their strength is real, but it's also a relic. It formed in a moment when needing others felt unsafe, when relying on someone meant disappointment. Over time, that survival skill hardens into an identity. They don't know how to say, "I'm struggling," because their history taught them no one would listen. Jung observed, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." The shadow here isn't evil. It's the disowned self, the parts deemed too fragile, too needy, too human to expose. Then there's the overthinker, the one who dissects every word, every glance, every silence. Their mind races not out of curiosity but fear, a fear that if they stop analyzing, they'll drown in feeling. Rationality becomes a shield, a way to sterilize emotion into something manageable. But as Jung warned, thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge. Judgment of self, of others, becomes a distraction from the raw, unprocessed ache beneath. The mind spins to avoid the heart's cry. And what of the empath, the one who feels others' pain as their own? Their compassion is genuine, but it's also a mirror. In tending to others' wounds, they avoid their own. They give freely, yet secretly resent the emptiness they refuse to acknowledge. This isn't empathy, it's projection. Jung called it carrying the unlived life of the parent, but it applies to any unhealed wound. We project onto others what we can't face in ourselves, mistaking their pain for ours. It's a beautiful, dangerous dance, a way to feel connected without risking true intimacy. Healing begins not with fixing, but witnessing. To see these patterns not as enemies, but as messengers. The person who isolates isn't rejecting you. They're protecting a version of themselves that once crumbled under rejection. The perfectionist isn't controlling. They're negotiating with a world that once made them feel unworthy. Even anger, that fiery mask, often hides a more tender truth. I am afraid. I am hurt. I am human. Jung's words ring here. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Awakening isn't about erasing the past, it's about loosening its grip. It's realizing that the child who learned to armor up still lives within you, not as a ruler, but as a teacher. Their strategies kept you alive. Now it's your turn to gently ask, what do you need me to know? The journey from defense to presence is slow. It's learning to distinguish the past's whispers from the present's reality. It's pausing when triggered to ask, is this now or then? It's allowing a sliver of vulnerability where once there was only stone. And in those moments, something shifts. The armor cracks, not to shatter, but to expand, to make room for a self that's both strong and soft, guarded and open, wounded and whole. For the person who's been hurt, love isn't a declaration. It's a series of tiny surrenders, letting someone see a flicker of doubt, sharing a memory that still aches, trusting that this time the ending might be different. It's terrifying. It's also the only way. As Jung reminds us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who we are isn't the armor. It's the breath beneath it, the fragile, resilient pulse that never stopped believing in connection. Imagine a healer whose hands tremble as they tend to others' wounds. They know the language of pain intimately, its rhythms, its shadows, its silent cries. Carl Jung called this archetype the wounded healer, a figure who transforms personal suffering into a bridge for others. Yet there's a delicate truth here. To heal others, you must first tend to your own scars. Jung wrote, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. Without this awareness, empathy becomes a mirror, reflecting back the parts of ourselves we've yet to reconcile. The caregiver who burns out, the listener who grows heavy with others' sorrow, they aren't failing. They're being asked to turn the same compassion inward, to recognize that holding space for others begins with holding space for the self. Consider the person who expects nothing, who navigates life with a quiet resignation. They've been let down too many times, by people, by fate, by their own hopes. To them, anticipation feels like a setup for disappointment. So they lower the bar, mute their desires, and call it realism. But Jung saw this differently. The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong. Expecting less isn't wisdom, it's the mind's attempt to control chaos. Yet in this calculated restraint, life loses its texture. Joy becomes a distant rumor, and dreams shrink to fit the confines of fear. The psyche, however, rebels. It whispers through restlessness, through sudden bursts of longing, through a quiet ache for more. Healing here isn't about reckless optimism. It's about reclaiming the right to want, even if wanting carries risk. It's learning to say, I deserve goodness, even when history argues otherwise. Then there's grief, the kind that lingers long after the event has passed. Not the grief of death, but of all that never was. The love unspoken, the childhood fractured, the trust shattered. Jung called these unlived lives, and they haunt like ghosts. What we resist persists, he warned. The ego, in its haste to move forward, often buries these losses under layers of distraction. But the soul remembers. It tugs at us in quiet moments, urging us to grieve what we've ignored. This isn't indulgence, it's alchemy. To sit with these absences, to name them, is to loosen their grip. The past stops being a prison and becomes a story, one that no longer dictates the plot. Think of the person who hides behind humor, who deflects depth with a joke. They're not avoiding connection, they're guarding a vault of unmet needs. Laughter becomes armor, shielding them from the vulnerability of saying, "This matters to me." Jung understood the duality of such masks. The persona is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society, a kind of mask designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. Over time, the mask fuses to the skin. The joker forgets how to weep. The cynic forgets how to hope. Yet beneath every persona lies a plea. See me, not the performance, but the pulse. And what of anger, that fiery, misunderstood emotion? It's rarely about the present. It's a protest against old injustices, a roar from the parts of us that felt powerless. Jung wrote, "There's no coming to consciousness without pain." Anger, when listened to, becomes a map. It points to boundaries trampled, values ignored, wounds unacknowledged. The person who erupts over a minor slight isn't irrational. They're echoing a lifetime of swallowed no's. To heal isn't to stifle the flame, but to ask, what is this fire defending? The journey from armor to authenticity is not a straight line. It's a spiral. You circle back to the same fears, the same triggers, but each time with a little more light. The goal isn't to eradicate defenses, but to soften their hold, to let the heart breathe beneath the armor. It's in the moments when you catch yourself overthinking and choose to feel instead. When you risk sharing a fragile truth. When you pause mid-reaction and whisper, "This isn't about them. This is about me." Jung's words guide us here. The most intense conflicts, if overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm that is not easily disturbed. These conflicts, with our past, our patterns, our shadows, are the forge where resilience is born. Every time you meet your pain with curiosity instead of judgment, you dilute its power. You rewrite the script from "I must protect myself" to "I am safe enough to grow." For those who've lived as fortresses, tenderness becomes revolutionary. It's allowing someone to see the cracks not as failures, but as proof of survival. It's replacing the question, "What's wrong with me?" with "What happened to me?" and listening deeply for the answer. This shift doesn't erase the past, but it changes your relationship to it. The memories remain, but they no longer hold the pen. In the end, healing is an act of reunion. The overthinker learns to trust the body's wisdom. The guarded heart learns to risk a fragile yes. The perfectionist learns to embrace the beauty of enough. And the wounded healer discovers that their greatest gift isn't their ability to fix others. It's their courage to stand whole and imperfect in their own truth. Jung reminds us, you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. To live this truth is to move from surviving to thriving, to let the armor rust as you step, trembling but alive, into the raw, radiant mess of being human. The journey isn't about arriving. It's about unfolding, and in that unfolding you find not just healing but home.